What's up, folks? This is Justin from Books, Bricks, and Boards, and today we're going to talk about something big. And by big, I mean tiny. Confused yet? That's okay. Tiny D6 is the system that is just full of self-contradictions. We're going to talk about the good and the bad, but right up front, I want to say, if you're looking for a simple system that can cover almost any genre, this is going to be well worth a look. If you are enjoying the content, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. If you want to support the channel financially, as well as receive some member perks, check out our channel membership program. Last but not least, if you want to join a group of the finest gamers in the world,
putting together a team
to discuss games and gaming, or to enjoy a play-by-post game, check out the Discord, link in the description. What is Tiny D6? Beginning as Tiny Dungeon and kickstarted by creator Brandon McFadden in 2014, Tiny D6 is a minimalist RPG relying upon a simple universal resolution mechanic, rolling between 1 to 3 six-sided dice looking for 5s or 6s. Every character should fit on a single note card, and most enemies are fully statted in a single sentence. Sounds like the kind of game system we would have homebrewed in the 1980s, but it has deceptive depth. First, characters each have a few traits that help them excel in certain situations, and every version of Tiny D6 adds its own unique takes on that system. The different versions of the system were introduced to us by Alan Barr of Gallant Knight Games, which kickstarted the second edition of Tiny Dungeon in the fall of 2017. Since then, Barr's team has covered several genres, from pirates to cyberpunk to Baywatch to supers and more. The core game very much stays in place with each iteration, but the traits available to heroes can vary wildly, as can the various genre-specific rules of each. For example, while the second edition of Tiny Dungeon provides rules for fantasy races, mass combat, naval encounters, and magic, amongst others, the Tiny Gunslingers rules adds procedures for pistol duels, even incorporating playing cards to give it a more authentic Western feel. I'll discuss a couple of the individual versions in more detail later in the video, but suffice it to say they each have some clever additions. The basic idea is that success is determined by tests, and obstacles require these tests to bypass them. This can be anything from jumping across a chasm to swinging a sword at a dragon. They all essentially boil down to a test. Standard tests involve rolling 2d6, needing a single 5 or 6 to succeed. If the character is in a disadvantaged position, such as using the wrong equipment, they only roll 1d6, still needing a 5 or a 6 for success. If they are advantaged or have some magical item that helps them with what they're trying to do, then they roll 3d6, still needing a single 5 or 6. That is the core of the game, covering everything from starship piloting to potion making. Attacks typically boil down to 1 damage for light attacks and 2 damage for heavy attacks. With average hero hit points around 6 and up to 2 attacks per turn, this game can be pretty deadly pretty quickly.
It's got a death curse!
If reduced to 0 hit points, you get a standard test to avoid death, and on failure, you get 1 more with only a single die, aka disadvantaged. The enemy pool varies wildly in number and quality from genre to genre, but generally they are piles of hit points with 1 or 2 special features to feel different. This is an area where GMs will need to place extra effort in descriptive gameplay and not mechanics, as well as in improvising situations to make the game feel more free-flowing than the core rules would suggest. For example, by the rules, a red dragon does 1 point of damage with each attack and gets the same 2 actions every turn that each hero does. But what if the GM also made the players test to avoid being crushed as the dragon scrambles to get to their enemies? Or perhaps the dragon does 1 point of damage for every 5 hit points it has. These are easily added but not present as is. If you're tracking so far, you are likely thinking this is a 20 to 30 page game running around $5 in print. It definitely could be, but it isn't. Tiny Gunslingers is less than 40 pages and includes 8 pages of setting info. That one is around $6.
Good. Getting my money's worth.
Tiny Dungeon 2nd edition, on the other hand, is 207 pages, of which 119 pages are micro settings for the game, a few pages each with occasional rule additions, and you pay for page count, with my softcover edition running $30. The Supers book is even bulkier at 264 pages, the majority devoted to the Gallant verse, which in my read was pretty boilerplate super stuff and frequently delved more into political beliefs than I prefer in my RPGs. The whole system could be written in less than 40 pages. 264 pages, to say it, seems like the RPG equivalent of a student padding their term paper to hit a required word count. That doesn't make the book or the system bad, but you should certainly know that before jumping in. Tiny Dungeon 2nd Edition. This next part of the video I will cover 2 of the 3 versions of Tiny D6 that I own, starting with Tiny Dungeon 2nd Edition. Despite what I consider to be an egregious page count for the material, this is my favorite version of Tiny D6. In it, we get 21 pages of the core rules, 17 pages on character creation, 6 pages of GM advice, 14 pages of optional rules, and the aforementioned 119 pages of micro settings. The core rules cover everything from tests to ranges to magic and even advancement. One of the many contradictory statements found in Tiny D6 on page 4, you won't find experience points in Tiny Dungeon. Then flip to page 21 and you get a half a page on experience points. It's not a big deal, but it just points to a lack of polish related to taking a 40-page game and making it into a 200-page game, a bit like Peter Jackson's Hobbit trilogy. The magic system is fine. So fine, in fact, that it is repeated nearly verbatim in the Supers book. Basically, you have readers that can read powerful but one-shot scrolls. You have Spell Touched, which can effectively use cantrips. And you have beast speakers, which can talk to animals. More powerful magics are covered in the optional Archmage schools of magic, which are prestige traits. The race choices boil down to starting hit points and a single racial trait. Most of the trope races are here, but as they are so simple, they would be easy enough to make on your own. But let me ask you this question. With 209 pages, you couldn't be troubled to add gnomes or halflings?
Even you couldn't say no to that.
Seems like an odd omission. The trait list is actually pretty good. In 4 pages, they give us enough choices to make most of our characters that we would want, even without classes. The equipment section is sparse, but as the effects are pretty universal, this is probably okay. The next section worth discussing is the bestiary at 24 pages, though it has a large number of dinosaurs in those pages. That said, there are enough good choices to keep a campaign going and give ideas on how to make your own. I do believe that the bigger monsters should be doing more damage. As written, most only do 1 point of damage and get the same actions as a single hero. This is probably okay, as hacking the game is trivially simple, as it is a very simple system. So just a word of warning to aspiring GMs out there. Finally, with the optional rules, we get to what I consider the reason to buy this over one of the other versions. With special rules for critical hits and fumbles, variable weapon damage, armor, the default rules, armor does nothing, naval and mounted combat, and a very nifty adventure generator. This makes it worth the price of admission. Beyond that, the new prestige traits provide a little more mechanical and narrative oomph, with options for archmages, druids, assassins, martial arts masters, and paladins. There is plenty to like here. Then we have the micro settings, 19 in total, covering subgenres and specific IPs, albeit with the serial numbers filed off. These are mostly fine, I guess, but for no more information than they give, one could easily just grab the information from your favorite novel or Wikipedia and call it good. Again, they aren't bad per se, just not good, and feel very much like page count puffery. Overall, the Tiny Dungeon 2nd Edition book is good at what it does, but at a cost some will question.
I am never going to financially recover from this.
Even with art repeated throughout the book multiple times, Tiny Dungeon 2nd Edition is worth owning in my opinion. And here is an unscripted sample of play for Tiny Dungeon 2nd Edition. In this scenario, we have Conan, and he is going to be facing up against 3 fodder-level enemies. These thugs and ruffians have probably captured some damsel, and Conan is trying to rescue her. All of Conan's stats are right here on this lovely note card. For Tiny Dungeon, initiative is simple as rolling a test. Remember, tests being looking for a 5 or a 6. Standard test roll 2 dice, disadvantage roll 1, and advantage roll 3. So we're going to roll 2d6, and since I got a success because I had a single 6, then I get to go first. If I'd failed the test, the enemies would get to go first. In Tiny D6, every character gets 2 actions. Movement is handled in range bands, so he's going to move to the closest range band, which will get him into melee with these enemies. He is a broadsword master, so he gets to roll 3 dice instead of 2. His weapon is a 2-handed weapon, so it is heavy, so it does 2 points of damage instead of 1. He has the ability Berserker, so he could take attacks with disadvantage to add +1 to his damage. And he has Cleave, which on a kill, he gets to take a disadvantage swing at another enemy. He is a diehard, so when he reaches 0 hit points, he gets 2 hit points back and gets to keep going. He can only do that once a day, though. And he is strong, so he has advantage on brute strength tests. For equipment, he has an adventurer's pack, a broadsword, and a nasty temper. So, he won initiative, he used his first action to move, his second action he used to attack. Were he already in melee with these enemies, he could use both actions to move or attack. So, he rolls his 3 dice, he got 1 5, he hits, so he does 2 damage. At fodder level, these characters only have 1 hit point. Since he killed one, his Cleave will kick in, and he'll get a disadvantaged attack, rolling 1 die against one of the other enemies. We'll choose him. And we rolled a 3, so we missed. Now it's time for the enemies to act. They are already in melee. This is not a square movement type of situation. Everything is very fluid, close, far range band. So he will get to attack. He hits, so that'll be 1 wound on Conan. Then he'll attack again, and he gets another hit. That's 2 wounds on Conan. This guy will attack. He hits. That's another wound on Conan, and he'll get another attack. And he got a 6 and a 5. That's another hit, so another wound on Conan. We're in trouble. So we're going to take our attacks this time. Now I could do what's called a focus. If I do a focus, then I am going to be able to do whatever action after the focus at a success on 4, 5, or 6. But since I'm rolling 3 dice already, I don't really need to do that. So I'm just going to do another standard attack on this guy here. And I got 2 6s, which will be a hit. If I'd rolled all 3 6s and was using the variable combat rules for critical hits, then I would do an extra point of damage on top of that. So I hit, I kill as he is fodder again, and because I have Cleave, I get a free disadvantage attack on this next gentleman. And I missed. So he is going to take his attack, and he misses, and then he is going to probably beg for his life. Conan, please don't kill me. Tiny Supers. Much of this section will be quickly covered as the majority of the first 20 pages is nearly exactly cut and paste from Tiny Dungeon with new art and layout, albeit more repeated art. The 24 pages of character creation is easily the high point for me. Instead of races, Supers gives archetypes like Paragon, Defender, Striker, Gadgeteer, Expert, Controller, and Mastermind. Mechanically, they are the same as Tiny Dungeon's races. For the normal traits, we get a list almost completely cribbed from Tiny Dungeons, but where this book shines is the power trait list. 14 pages of power traits, each with 3 different power tiers depending on how powerful you want your campaign to be. These are going to, with minimal imagination, cover 90% of your hero and villain creations. With the core mechanics so simple and flexible, running these powers will be a breeze. These 14 pages are what makes me consider running this game more, as it is the simplest super game I've ever read.
Trust me, true believer.
Then we have the Gallantverse. These 168 pages are decidedly not what I was looking for, and by comparison, the Tiny Dungeon micro settings are much more appealing.
But aside from that, it's pretty much the same thing.
There are some NPCs to steal and use as enemies and allies, and inspire new creations, but nothing in the writing makes me want to know more about the Gallantverse. I definitely don't want to play there. The ultra campy Sentinel comic RPG world looks like Shakespeare beside the Gallantverse. Not my bag. If you like it, cool. There are a few micro settings here too, and they are actually pretty decent for what they are trying to do. And here's a sample play from Tiny D6 Supers. I've got Batman, all of his stats nicely arranged on this single note card here, and he will be facing up against Bane. Bane's going to be a little bit tougher enemy than what Conan was up against, so you'll kind of see what I'm talking about with bigger enemies being a little bit more disappointing. But here we go. As with Tiny Dungeon, we're going to roll initiative up front, and Batman actually gets an advantage on his initiative because I gave him Vigilant. He is what they call a expert archetype, so he gets extra traits. Only one of those traits can be a superpower, though. So he has Armored, which reduces damage by 1, Vigilant, which gives him advantage on initiative, Sneaky, which gives him advantage on sneaking rolls. He's a martial artist, so once per encounter he can re-roll an attack or an evade. And he has Heavy Strikes, so his unarmed attacks are considered heavy damage, so he does 2 points with his unarmed strikes. For equipment, he has a utility belt, which is his adventurer's pack. He has his armor, and he has a Bat credit card. So we will roll initiative. Batman gets advantage, so he gets a 6, so he succeeds. He's going to go before Bane. I'm going to give Bane, let's say, 10 hit points. And because Bane's big, I'm going to give him 3 damage on every attack. Of course, Batman's armor is going to reduce that by 1, so it's going to go down to 2. Batman is going to go ahead and move into combat with Bane. He is an expert with his unarmed attacks. He hits. That'll be 2 damage to Bane, which we will just track right on the mat. So Batman has moved and he's attacked. That's the end of his turn. Bane is going to go ahead and make his attack. I think he's an expert with his unarmed attacks as well, so we're going to give him 3 dice to attack. Of course he hits, and that does 3 damage to Batman, reduced by 1 by his armor, so 2 points of damage. Bane is going to go again, and he gets another hit, doing 2 more points of damage. Batman, knowing that he is at a distinct disadvantage here, is going to attempt to throw a gas pellet and sneak away. So his first action is going to be to throw his gas pellet. We'll see if that goes off. Regular action to do that. He got a 2 and a 4. That is not going to work. Apparently he grabbed the shark repellent instead. He's going to try to clock Bane before he goes down. And he misses. 4-3-3. Now Bane is going to take his option to focus, so he's going to hit on a 4, 5, or 6. And he gets 5, 5, 6. He has broken the bat. Tiny D6, the good and the bad. First, the good. Number 1, minimalist play done right. I was a little bit skeptical that this core resolution mechanic of rolling 1 to 3 d6 would be effective at what it's trying to cover, which is effectively everything. I was wrong. It does feel right. It feels good, and it's quick. My 6-year-old really likes the concept, and that has been able to help me get him to the table more often. The dungeon you see in front of you is actually one of his own design. And because the system is so simple, he can not only play in this system, he can run this system for me. And that is a joy that is worth its weight in gold. By adding in some custom house rules and some of the optional rules, the system is big enough that it can cover most of your needs and satisfy most of your players. That said, it's still minimalist. Number 2, pick a genre, any genre. As I mentioned in the beginning, there are tons of Tiny D6 genre books available, and they all have the full rules because the full rules take about 2 sentences to actually convey. You can play in the Old West. You can play in cyberpunk future. You can play a Baywatch game. You can play a medieval Cheers style game with tiny taverns. There is no end to the options in the Tiny D6 system, and from what I've seen in the 3 that I own, they each add some worthwhile genre rules and traits and make you feel like they aren't just a complete cash grab like some game designers that I've seen out there. Number 3, great introductory system. Now my kids have already been raised on basic D&D and advanced Dungeons and Dragons, so this isn't really an introduction to them, but it could have been. And I really think this would have been a much easier teach and would have captured their imagination a little bit quicker. The great thing about Tiny Dungeon is if they want to see it on the table, it's very easy to improvise because mechanically everything is so similar. So if they wanted to play a dragon instead of a knight, you could probably allow that. You just give them a couple cool dragony traits and make them a little more powerful, and you don't have to worry about breaking the system because the system is so beautifully simple. This is something that I think should be touted as a major pro for this game, is that not just for kids, but for anyone that you're wanting to introduce to RPGs that has never played, Tiny D6 is ideal. Now the bad. Number 1, page filler. If you look at these books, you would think that you have a massive tome of great information about an RPG system. Unfortunately, most of it is puffery. The micro settings are fine, but they're basically high school level essays on someone's idea of what they might want to do for a campaign without fleshing any of it out. These books should be less than 40 pages. And at 200 or more pages, it is blatantly obvious that we're trying to make this a bigger product than what it is. That said, I still bought the 2 biggest ones, so it obviously worked. Number 2, fiction fail. I am sure that Alan Barr is a very nice gentleman. I don't enjoy his writing as far as fiction goes. I think his mechanical additions to the Tiny D6 system have been very well done from what I've seen, and I'm looking forward to seeing more. But if I never read one of his stories about supers or his personal micro settings, then I would be fine with that because I don't find them to be capturing my imagination. He's a much better writer than I am, but I'm not hawking books for $30 and $40. Number 3, priced by the page. This is a real sticking point for me. These should not be $30 and $40 books. Even at the page count, this should be at most a $15 to $20 book. The only reason these books have to cost as much as they do is because they have been filled with what effectively equates to campaign notes from your average RPG table. I think that if this were ever redesigned as a truly minimalist product, he could probably package several genres into one book, keep the fluff to a minimum, put a bunch of these different setting rules into one big tiny D6 master book, and it would sell like hotcakes. And it wouldn't have to puff up the page count. And he wouldn't have to use the same art over and over and over again because he wouldn't have as much ground to fill in. Summary. I'm not sure if Gallant Knight Games has an army of rabid supporters, but I'm sure they will find me after this video. Honestly, I really like what they've done here mechanically, but there is definitely a feeling that less would have been more in most of what I've seen. Will that stop me from running my son through a tiny dungeon of his own? No way. I'm pretty excited to give it another go with him. I also think he'll enjoy the simple take on superheroes once I stat up a few of his favorites to do battle with. As far as RPGs go, this isn't a great and impressive innovation that will keep you mesmerized by its mechanics and enthralled by its shining storytelling. It's a beer and pretzels, or milk and cookies as it were, romp through a dungeon, and that is okay. There is plenty of room for games of all weights, and this one happens to set at the lightest end. It's just too bad that the cost doesn't reflect that. These are my thoughts, but I'd love to hear yours. Have you played any of the Tiny D6 games? If so, which is your favorite? Do you disagree with any of my takes, and why? Is there a genre that Tiny D6 hasn't covered yet that you'd like to see? Tell me about it in the comments. Would you look at these absolute legends? Keith Simon, Dengar the Mighty, Drake, Blue Rose Lion, Mike the Hammer. Special thanks to I Am Not 10 and ACD. Thank you so much for your donations. Appreciate it very much. Coming soon. We have quite a schedule on the horizon. Next week I'll be revisiting Dragonbane and sharing some new related goodies. Then on April 19th, part 1 of my series on the original Dungeons & Dragons, Dave and Gary's Dungeons & Dragons, covering the white box. As per my last series, the better this one performs, the quicker I'll get the subsequent videos out, eventually covering all 7 official books plus chainmail. So be sure to share it on your related gaming groups and get the word out. Until next time, this has been Justin from Books, Bricks, and Boards. Good gaming, and God bless.